By late summer of 1944, the Allies stood on the brink of triumph. France had been liberated, Paris was free, the German army was in retreat, stumbling back toward its own borders. After years of brutal fighting across North Africa, Italy, and Normandy, it finally seemed as though the war in Europe could end before Christmas. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had a bold idea: a single, decisive strike through the heart of German defenses. His plan, codenamed Operation Market Garden, would be the largest airborne assault in history. In a single move, thousands of paratroopers would seize a corridor of key bridges across the Netherlands. If they succeeded, Allied forces could cross the Rhine, bypass the Siegfried Line, and drive straight into Germany, ending the war in 1944. It was audacious, risky, even reckless. But to many commanders weary of the endless grind, it sounded like hope. Hope that they could go home soon. Hope that the bloodshed might finally end. As one officer put it quietly before takeoff, "We'll be home by Christmas, or we won't come home at all."
The operation was divided into two parts: Market, the airborne assault, and Garden, the ground advance. Under Market, 3 airborne divisions, the American 101st, the American 82nd, and the British 1st Airborne, would drop behind enemy lines across the Netherlands. Their mission: capture a series of bridges over the major rivers, the Maas, the Waal, and the Rhine. Meanwhile, Garden would see the British 30th Corps, under Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, launch a rapid ground offensive from the Belgian border. They would race up the single highway that linked all the captured bridges, a narrow, exposed road that soon earned a name among the soldiers: Hell's Highway. Montgomery believed the plan could work if everything went perfectly. But in war, nothing ever does. The Allies underestimated German strength in the region. They believed they were facing disorganized remnants. In reality, 2 SS Panzer divisions, elite, battle-hardened units, were regrouping near Arnhem, right where the British 1st Airborne would land. And then there was the weather. Airborne drops required clear skies. But the Netherlands in September was unpredictable. Fog, wind, and low clouds would soon play their art. Still, on the morning of September 17, 1944, the skies over southern England roared to life with the thunder of aircraft. The greatest airborne armada in history was about to take flight.
It was a sight the world had never seen. More than 2,000 planes filled the sky, towing gliders and packed with paratroopers. Below, civilians in Dutch towns looked up in awe as thousands of parachutes bloomed like flowers against the blue. The 101st Airborne landed near Eindhoven. Their goal: seize the bridges over the Wilhelmina Canal. The 82nd dropped near Nijmegen to capture the bridges over the Waal. And farthest to the north, the British 1st Airborne, the Red Devils, descended near Arnhem, tasked with taking the final bridge over the Rhine itself. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan. The landings were precise, resistance was light. The Dutch resistance emerged from hiding to help guide Allied troops.
But cracks appeared quickly. Many gliders crashed in the fields. Supplies were scattered. Radios malfunctioned. Units became separated in the confusion.
And in Arnhem, something far worse awaited. German reconnaissance units spotted the parachute drops within minutes. SS General Wilhelm Dietrich immediately ordered his armored divisions to move. Tanks began to roll toward Arnhem before the British even reached the town. Lieutenant Colonel John Frost and his men managed to capture the northern end of the bridge, but they were soon surrounded. From the windows of Dutch houses, civilians watched as British paratroopers dug in along the riverbank, preparing to hold the bridge for 2 days, the time they were told it would take for ground forces to reach them. They would hold it for 4.
While the paratroopers fought to secure their bridges, the tanks of 30 Corps began their long drive north. The narrow, exposed road was the lifeline of the entire operation, and the Germans knew it. The first day went well. Villages fell quickly, and by nightfall, Horrocks tanks had linked up with the 101st Airborne. But soon the pace slowed. Every few kilometers, the Germans blew up a bridge or ambushed the convoy. The road was so narrow that if one tank was hit, everything behind it stopped. Artillery rained down from both sides. Trucks burned. Medics ran through ditches, dragging the wounded to safety. Locals later said the road looked like a single line of fire stretching across the Dutch countryside. For the soldiers of 30 Corps, every meter was paid in blood and steel. One sergeant later recalled, "You could look up that road and see death waiting for you, but you still drove forward because men up ahead were counting on you." Meanwhile, the British 1st Airborne in Arnhem radioed desperately for help. Their situation was deteriorating fast.
By September 20th, Frost's men were trapped in a nightmare. German tanks pounded their positions from both sides. Snipers picked off anyone who moved. The houses they had fortified were reduced to rubble. Still, they refused to surrender. Civilians sheltered in their basements, listening to the thunder of artillery. Many risked their lives to bring water or bandages to the paratroopers. Dutch nurses worked beside British medics in makeshift field hospitals, tending to both Allied and German wounded. But as days passed, ammunition ran low, food was gone, communications were cut, reinforcements never came. When a German officer finally approached under a white flag, Frost's men could barely stand. They had held out for 4 days against an entire SS division. Of the 10,000 men who landed near Arnhem, less than 2,000 would escape. The rest were killed or captured.
While Arnhem fell into chaos, the 82nd Airborne faced their own impossible task at Nijmegen. The main bridge was still held by the Germans, and time was running out. To take it, they made one of the most daring assaults of the war. In broad daylight, under heavy fire, American paratroopers crossed the Waal River in small wooden boats. Machine guns ripped the water apart. Boats shattered. Men drowned. But somehow they made it to the far bank and stormed the bridge from both ends. By nightfall, Nijmegen was theirs. But it had cost hundreds of lives. And even with the bridge taken, the advance toward Arnhem came too late.
By September 25th, the operation was collapsing. Rain poured down over the burning city of Arnhem, as the remnants of the 1st Airborne tried to withdraw across the Rhine. The wounded were left behind. Civilians wept as stretcher-bearers carried men through flooded fields under fire. That night, under cover of darkness, small boats ferried survivors to safety on the southern bank. Out of nearly 35,000 paratroopers dropped during the operation, over 17,000 were killed, wounded, or captured. For the Dutch civilians, liberation was delayed for another long, starving winter.
Operation Market Garden failed to achieve its objective. The Allies had gambled on speed, daring, and surprise, but logistics, weather, and underestimation of the enemy had turned hope into tragedy. Yet even in failure, it revealed something profound about the human spirit, the courage of the men who jumped into the unknown, the resilience of the civilians who endured the battle, and the unity of nations that believed victory, even if delayed, was still possible. Months later, when the Allies finally crossed the Rhine for real, they passed the ruins of Arnhem Bridge. It stood twisted and silent, a monument to bravery and sacrifice. A British officer who had fought there simply said, "It was a bridge too far."